You are listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla, your source for the uncensored truth regarding the human, extraterrestrial, social, global, and political agenda. Click the like button and subscribe to this channel. Visit exopolitics.org and sign up to receive our email notifications, news, and information. Be informed and be aware with Exopolitics Today. And now, here's Dr. Michael Salla.
Multiple galactic federations are intervening in human affairs. In part 1 of this series, I discussed remote viewing sessions conducted by the Farsight Institute on the Galactic Federation of Worlds, which has been allegedly intervening on Earth from remote antiquity and even played a role in the genetic engineering of humanity. When examining the work of multiple insiders and contactees, however, it becomes clear that there is more than one association of human-like interplanetary civilizations using names similar to or adaptations of Galactic Federation. For example, in his 1958 book, The Council of Seven Lights, George Van Tassel talked about the Adamic Confederation of Space Brothers landing on Earth at the dawn of history and mating with the race of Eve, primitive humans. In his 1974 book, Invitation, Peruvian contactee Sixto Paz Wells also spoke about a large interplanetary association called the Confederation that was helping humanity's evolution. In 1981, the famous Law of One channeling introduced two main extraterrestrial factions that have historically intervened in human evolution. These were named the Confederation of Planets and Orion Crusaders by the extraterrestrial group calling itself the Ra Social Memory Complex that belonged to the former. The Confederation and Orion Crusaders were respectively positive and negative in ethical orientation and attitudes towards human evolution, in ways that are very similar to what the Farsight remote viewers had to say respectively about the Galactic Federation of Worlds and the Orion Alliance. Among the first to publicly discuss three or more rival extraterrestrial interplanetary alliances involved in humanity's creation and or vying over human affairs ever since was the contactee Alex Collier, who publicly emerged around 1991 with lectures about his experiences with a human-looking alliance of extraterrestrials called the Andromeda Council. He said it comprised 139 different star systems, and it had become interested in Earth due to the Andromedans' detection of a galactic tyranny 350 years in the future that could be traced to the Earth, Moon and Mars in the present era. In his lectures, some of which were compiled in the book Defending Sacred Ground, he described the different extraterrestrial groups that had established a presence on Earth. These included the Draconian Sakaar Empire, a group from the Orion constellation, Greys and Humans, a galactic commonwealth made up of developing human civilizations, and the Andromeda Council. These are similar negative extraterrestrial groups to those Dr. Brown's remote viewing team had identified: Draco reptilians, Greys, and beings from Orion. Some members of the Galactic Federation, aka Commonwealth, according to Collier, played a role in the genetic engineering of humanity and have ever since been interested in human affairs. Other Federation members, however, have played no role in human history and have little interest in Earth. Due to time travel technology, however, the Federation can insert their operatives or intervene far into humanity's past to influence contemporary events to prevent future galactic tyranny. When seen in the context of the Draco and Orion groups also intervening in human affairs, it becomes clear that current events on Earth are part of a temporal war between the three main extraterrestrial alliances over our destiny. Overall, Collier spoke about 22 extraterrestrial civilizations that had genetically intervened in human affairs and were responsible for the different racial and ethnic groups on Earth, which is not the norm in our galaxy. These 22 groups appear to be drawn from mostly human-looking races from the 3 competing extraterrestrial alliances, not just members of the Galactic Federation. Other notable individuals with relevant information about different interplanetary associations include the whistleblower Dr. Michael Cruvant-Wolf. In the late 1990s, Wolf gave interviews to several notable UFO researchers such as Paola Harris and Dr. Richard Boylan after the publication of his book, The Catchers of Heaven, published in 1996. Here is a summary of the 3 main extraterrestrial alliances that Wolf had revealed in his interviews and book. Quote, "The Majestic 12 organization was aware of all 3 major Confederation groups: the Joint Humanoid Reptiloid Corporate Alliance, the Mostly Humanoid Federation of Worlds, or FOW, the Mostly Reptiloid Unified Races of Orion, or URO. The Mostly Humanoid Federation of Worlds corresponds with the Galactic Federation of Worlds that Dr. Brown and his remote viewing team were focusing on. The other 2 groups comprised a significant reptilian element in their composition. These roughly equate to the Draconian Reptilian Empire and Orion Alliance that the Farsight Institute remote viewers were referring to. In 2015, Corey Goode began to speak of a super federation comprising between 40 to 60 extraterrestrial civilizations in charge of up to 22 genetic experiments on Earth. In a Q&A, Good distinguished between the Super Federation and Galactic Federation. Quote, question, how is the Galactic Federation different to the Super Federation? Good responds, the Super Federation is made up of 4th to 5th density beings that comprise the genetic farmer races, as well as civilizations that were products of the grand experiment that advanced to the point of becoming a part of the group doing the experiments. We are supposed to be graduating to this same point very soon. The Galactic Federation, as stated above, is more responsible for maintaining this universe reality for the one infinite creator and exists within what we would consider other density or even an angelic realm. One of the messages I got from the Sphere Being Alliance was, we are the messengers and facilitators of the one infinite creator. End quote. When it came to the relationship between the Sphere Being Alliance and the Galactic Federation, this is what Good explained in a Q&A. Quote, question, what is the Galactic Federation? Who are its members? Good replies, I have referenced it as the Galactic Federation through Tia Ear, Good's primary ET contact, while the Anshar, an inner Earth civilization, are calling it the Galactic Confederation. The members are highly spiritually and technologically advanced, 6th plus density civilizations that cooperate to facilitate both cosmic law and the various cosmic cycles. The members of the Sphere Being Alliance, the Guardians, are members of this federation. End quote. Clearly, there was an important difference between the Galactic Federation, aka Confederation, and the Super Federation, managing Earth's 22 genetic experiments. In order to avoid confusion and maintain consistency with earlier sources such as George Van Tassel, The Law of One Material, and Sixto Paz Wells, I will use the term Galactic Confederation to denote this higher density advisory body. While the Galactic Confederation operated as a higher density overseer to maintain cosmic law, the Super Federation were direct stakeholders in Earth affairs, having distinct agendas and were rivals that would experience conflicts among themselves and or with the Draconian and Orion groups. Consequently, the Galactic Confederation could act as an arbiter of disputes between Super Federation members that were genetically engineering humanity or step in if a violation of cosmic law was happening. This is consistent with Collier's claim that the Andromeda Council, a 6th plus density association, advised the Galactic Commonwealth, aka Confederation, of a future galactic tyranny. In 2018, Good described a major breakthrough insofar as the Super Federation decided to take a step back and allow humanity to determine its own destiny due to intervention by the 6th to 9th density Sphere Being Alliance / Galactic Confederation. In response to Professor Haim's 2020 groundbreaking revelations on the Galactic Federation, Good reiterated that there are multiple Federation groups interested in human affairs, and again emphasizing that the Super Federation, comprising many Nordic extraterrestrial groups, is a local deliberative body that is distinct from the higher density Galactic Confederation to which the Sphere Being Alliance belonged. Good elaborated further on these different groups in a December 2020 interview. Quote, "You hear Galactic Federation a lot. Well, that could apply to many different groups, like, the Sphere Being Alliance. They're a part of this, like a Galactic Watcher kind of group that are overwatching higher density realms and are also looking after the lower density realms to make sure everything's being done according to cosmic law. These are like 6th, 7th density beings, very evolved beings. And then you go down to 4th and 5th density beings, and those include anything from the reptilians to these tall Nordic races, different types of beings that we lump into what we call the Greys. There's a whole assortment of these other types of beings. Insectoids are extremely into genetics. That's all of their technology is genetic manipulation, and even the ships they fly in. And they are a part of these little federations together. They work with reptilians sometimes, and they have agreements of convenience as well, because some of them have genetic, spiritual timeline agendas that conflict with other people in this super federation." End quote. This leads to the question of whether the Galactic Federation of Worlds that Brown's Farsight group remote viewed was part of this higher density oversight group that Good's Sphere Being Alliance belonged to, the Galactic Confederation, or one of the other federations that are in conflict with rival associations such as the Draconian Empire or Orion Collective. It appears clear from the remote viewing sessions that the Galactic Federation of Worlds is a direct party in ongoing conflicts with the Draco and Orion groups, rather than an oversight group applying cosmic law as an impartial arbiter. The Galactic Federation of Worlds conducts military operations, has space fleets battling against the reptilians / Orions, has undercover operatives infiltrating into human society, etc. The Galactic Federation of Worlds operations, described by the Farsight Institute, are very similar to what has also been recently revealed by the French contactee and former professional archaeologist Elena Danan. She has publicly released her communications with 4 individual representatives of the Galactic Federation of Worlds that date from 2018, which is the time she says she was activated and decided to commit herself full-time to her new career. Significantly, she described the recent decision by the Galactic Federation of Worlds to increase their military operations and interventions on Earth and nearby celestial bodies such as the Moon and Mars, and support indigenous resistance efforts against Draco and Orion control. This is consistent with Collier's earlier observations about the Andromeda Council contacting the Galactic Confederation to preempt the Earth becoming the epicenter for a future galactic tyranny. Furthermore, this is also consistent with what Brown's remote viewing team had observed back in February 2021, and suggests that the Galactic Federation of Worlds has taken a very recent decision to intervene in human affairs more vigorously. It's worth emphasizing that the Galactic Federation of Worlds appears to be a more activist organization to the higher density Galactic Confederation that Good said the Sphere Being Alliance belonged to, and whose recent activities he has described in detail since 2014. While there are some similarities between the Sphere Being Alliance / Galactic Confederation operations described by Good with what Farsight and Danan have claimed about the Galactic Federation of Worlds, there are also significant differences. This suggests that the Galactic Federation of Worlds is working with or under the guidance of the Galactic Confederation in upholding cosmic law when it comes to the future of humanity. This very likely occurs through highly evolved extraterrestrial members such as the Andromedans and Arcturians, who are members of both groups. It's worth recalling that Edgar Cayce, the famous American psychic, viewed the Arcturians as among the most highly evolved civilizations in our galaxy, as I describe in my 2013 book, Galactic Diplomacy. In conclusion, it is clear that humanity is being visited by multiple extraterrestrial civilizations, many of which belong to at least 3 rival extraterrestrial alliances that are competing over human affairs. These rival organizations appear to be a Galactic Federation of Worlds, a Draconian Empire, and an Orion Alliance. In addition, there appears to be a grouping of extraterrestrials that have been running 22 genetic experiments on Earth, previously called the Super Federation, which is being reconstituted as humanity takes control over its own genetic evolution. Finally, there is a higher density group also called the Galactic Federation, to which the Sphere Being Alliance and Andromeda Council belong, and which appears to be an arbiter of cosmic law. These 5 distinct associations of extraterrestrial races appear to be the key players in Earth's current events. The worldwide extraterrestrial cover-up has made it very difficult for the general public to ascertain what is happening. Nevertheless, thanks to the collective efforts of the Farsight Institute, individuals such as Corey Goode and Elena Danaan, Alex Collier, and other historical sources, we get a more accurate picture of what is currently happening. This has been Dr. Michael Salla with Exopolitics Today. This concludes this 2-part series of articles on remote viewing of the Galactic Federation of Worlds. For part 1, visit my website or look in the description box below. Don't forget to subscribe or join my email list on exopolitics.org to get updates on future articles and Exopolitics Today podcasts. Thank you for listening, and aloha.